Hi everyone. For this presentation I covered the article Library Catalog Search Interface Making the Most of Subject Metadata by Nolli et al. As for the reason as to why I chose it, I wanted to research more on metadata and controlled vocabulary so I could have a solid grasp on it and identify the different ways it's presented in systems. Here is my citation. The article begins with some terms. Knowledge organization systems is used to denote terminological and classification systems, tools, and services developed to organize knowledge sources by subject and includes automatic categorization. Controlled vocabulary and indexing are two expressions mentioned. Nolli says that two main types of indexing language are alphabetical and systematic. They start off by stating, subject access in online library catalogs has not been satisfactory. This I agree with and is a strength to this article, as they mention how retrieval failures are common. Nolli ends the definitions with subject being a topic that a work is about. In comparison to known item searching, searching by subject often proves much more challenging. An overview of some kind would be useful, like browsing a tree of concepts. Another issue present has to do with the same word can take on different meanings, which means too many results to review manually. Synonymy presents challenges to effective searching by placing the burden on the searcher, which means to include all possible synonyms the Boolean operator OR must be utilized. One other problem mentioned is how the problem is exacerbated with non-textual media that do not lend themselves to full-text searching or do not have a narrative and are open to interpretation. In terms of how to address these issues, Nolli decides that online search services should enable the use of assigned subject indexing, where a user selects a more specific concept to increase precision, a broader concept or related concepts to increase recall. In addition, hierarchical browsing could help the user improve their understanding of their information requirements and formulate their queries more accurately. One weakness of this article is that it does not elaborate enough on how to implement these into the systems. However, it later does delve into how to deal with them in archives and museums. Nolli goes on to bring up the 5 user tasks of finding, identifying, selecting, obtaining, and exploring as important facets that need to be addressed with the use of subject indexing. Research description and access point out that subject representation or relationship to the subject of a work is needed. Nolli argues, in spite of over 100 years of developing and implementing bibliographic standards, including those related to subject indexing, bibliographic systems have never reached their full potential. They say that functionalities similar to Google and Amazon are appealing, like single search box, attractive web design, relevance ranking, and so on, but come with problems like millions of hits. The most common issues regarding subject searching are inconsistency and incompleteness of metadata and the blending of controlled vocabularies. The large volume online leads to information overload and entropy. Nolli says, although full-text searching works for some tasks, for others it creates information overload and prevents the searcher from gaining a comprehensive overview of a topic. They continue by saying, the lack of funding is likely a cause for the differences in coverage and effectiveness of indexing between science and humanities, the latter having much less commercial relevance. So they say the humanities has less effectiveness with subject indexing. Other solutions include post-Boolean probabilistic searching on full text, assigning high weights to subject headings, qualification cataloging like metadata including genre, purpose, reviews, and academic level. Nolli adds, major findings related to subject access show the need to provide context of what has been searched and what is not included, and that discovery service was less effective than individual databases. Another issue that needs addressing is how terms like subject, keyword, and category are loosely and sometimes interchangeably used, but it is not stated what kind of controlled vocabulary it is, if any, or what the differences are between them. By stating this, Noli is showing how confusing this all can be for the end user. Noli also references the explore objective being difficult without the ability to browse around related topics, such as through using related terms in a thesaurus, or see narrower and broader terms or classes in order to understand the relationships between, because LRM and FRSAD do not address the user tasks. Relating back to the humanities, one study established that 10 individual databases in the humanities provided no controlled vocabularies for humanities resources. Noli then goes on into how this all relates to museum catalogs. While some online museums support subject access, others don't because it's not necessary for its operation, unlike object registration and the like. They find that many museums describe their collections in far too simple terms, which include the title of a work, the creator's name, dimensions, and sometimes a picture of the museum's object. Again, one of the issues with this article by Noli has to do with a lack of elaboration. It is not that I disagree with the article's argument, but that it is weak in some areas with how much they cover the topic. For instance, they say systems should employ a number of subject functionalities on their information search interfaces. For example, choose a more specific concept to increase precision, a broader concept, or related concepts to increase recall. They do go on to argue for supporting interactive search query reformulation and expansion, as well as exact and partial matches, and should also provide an option to browse hierarchical classification schemes and multilingual support. Yet another solution should be disambiguation, like offering the user different concepts such as Jaguar the car or Jaguar the animal, as well as when the user types a search term, narrower and broader terms should also be shown, which is a great solution and a strength of this article's argument. Such an example shows how much systems can improve. Going further, Noli argues for adding, searching, and browsing end-user tags, which I think is a useful addition to these systems, but could pose some challenges, like too many results. In terms of images, image-related characteristics like size and color should also be searchable. Noli also talks about autocompletion, autocorrection, combining previous search formulations to help researchers who may need to combine a number of search terms, as well as highlighting the search terms in the retrieved results. One positive mention in the recent project QueerLit is how it links each subject access point to its resources. I like that the article uses this case study to show a generally strong recent interface project that utilizes subject access and its functionalities. Noli ends the article by saying that finally the interface and its different features need to be evaluated with user studies focusing on user experience. Doing so will place the need for systems to adapt to users rather than users adapting to systems. I think it's useful that Noli recognizes that although the current scope is focused on academic libraries and discovery systems, many of the guidelines will be applicable to other cultural heritage institutions such as archives, galleries, or museums. Noli argues, it is important to provide quality subject access. The general objective of subject indexing is to find anything and everything in the collection, including cross-search collections, that is relevant to a certain topic, and this requires the use of controlled vocabularies to ensure high precision and recall. They say that most information systems do not take advantage of controlled vocabulary, which I think is true, especially when inconsistent and incomplete metadata and blending in controlled vocabularies, free keywords, and full-text automatic indexing create significant problems for subject searching. Designs and tests should be used, which include user studies, analyses of real search sessions of humanities scholars, especially with the humanities with the lack of funding and support. Noli ends by saying how subject indexing has only been explored with string matching, and that mechanisms for meaningful ordering, word term disambiguation, more specific terms, and broader terms for identifying which terms denotes a concept throughout the database exists in KOS, and putting them to use is long overdue. All in all, this article by Noli et al. Covers a topic that should have been addressed a while ago, since subject access is something that appeals to the needs of users like researchers and the like. A focus on the humanities is important in order to broaden its range into other disciplines. Doing so will help users understand the relationships between terms and also aid in precision and recall, and will overall help with finding the right amount of relevant results.